I just kept saying to myself, there's a lot of things I would do if I wasn't a chef. And I remembered back in all those things I wanted to do, and I'd be like, I'm in Napa. I had worked a little bit in winemaking in the Finger Lakes and in France as well at Louis Jadot for about a week. I was like, well, why don't I learn how to make wine?
This podcast is sponsored by Release Winery. Join us as the story of this ultra-limited wine continues. Learn more at releasewinery.com.
Different interview today. I am here at the Capitol Grill in Milwaukee, meeting with a Napa Valley winemaker. I'm here with Jesse Fox. Jesse's the winemaker at Sequoia Grove. Welcome to the podcast, Jesse.
Thank you so much, Jay, for having me. I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, me too. I appreciate you taking the time. I know you have a busy trip, so we're going to try and cover as much ground as we can. I have to apologize to our listeners. We have business going on here. It's a busy restaurant, so we're going to move on without further ado. So I'd like to find out information about a winemaker, where you came from when you were stung by the bee called wine. But first, you came primarily from hospitality, culinary world, right?
I did. I always like to say that I was a chef in a previous life. I found a lot of similarities between winemaking and cooking. I think the idea of working with a team, kind of having your intense moments, kind of like harvest, where everybody needs to work together to kind of get through the shift or get through the season. And I think it's exciting, and I love that part. As hard as that time of year is, you know, on personal life and time, and you're working all hours, I think it's still one of my most favorite times of year.
Now, you're educated in the culinary business, so let's talk about, I guess I should, it's sort of a chicken and the egg thing. Which came first, wine or food?
Well, I grew up outside of Philadelphia, and I developed a passion for food early on. My mother used to cook in the kitchen all the time, make her own cakes for birthdays, things like that. So that really excited me. I used to watch cooking shows growing up, so I really wanted to be a chef. That was my goal. I love the creative side of things. I love working with my hands, and I think that was really important. So when I decided to go off to college, I didn't really have as much experience in the industry. My family wasn't necessarily foodies, although they loved food, but we mostly stayed in. But I kind of looked abroad. I looked everywhere, and I thought, well, maybe I'll go to school for something else, but kind of work as a chef and see if that's what I want to do, because I really wanted that background of a college education. But then I found Cornell University, and I visited there, and I saw the food labs they had, and I was like, wow, this is a great opportunity to not only get a great college education and business background, understand the full scope of what I'm thinking about getting into, and still have a little bit of cooking. And so I kind of committed to Cornell and decided I would cook while I was there. But that really was how it started off. And it's also how I got into wine. You know, I basically took every food and wine class I possibly could. I spent my summers working in restaurants all through different organizations, different opportunities, different internships. I also took opportunities to be extra involved at the university, and the same with wine. You know, my senior year at Cornell, I worked at a winery. Kind of on the side. I worked in the restaurants there. I was a manager, I was a bartender, I was a server. I kind of really got my experience doing that. But I wanted to be a chef. I had an amazing opportunity when I graduated. Actually, before I graduated, I knew I was going to graduate early, and I convinced my parents to pay for culinary school in Paris if I could finish a semester early. And what I ended up doing was I took the semester off. I worked at a great restaurant in Evanston called Trio. And that was my first really high-end restaurant experience. And then I went to culinary school in Paris. I came back, I finished my degree, and I was fortunate enough to get this scholarship from the Kopp family, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But that took me all around the world to visit wineries, work in wineries right after I graduate, and give me a little bit of a head start in the industry before I moved to New York City to work as a chef there.
It's not completely typical of this industry to find chefs becoming winemakers. So how did that decision come to you, go, I want to do this with wine?
Well, the first thing that I think is most important in life, at the age of 18, I actually studied abroad. I lived in Israel for a year and kind of had this amazing experience. And I remember this moment that I had where I knew I was going into something very specific, like the hospitality industry, wanting to be a chef. And I made a promise to myself when I was 18 years old that although it's a bit scary to the idea of like kind of pigeonhole yourself into one specific industry, I said, look, this is what I want to do right now. And if in 5 years, 10 years, I change, I'm going to be okay with that. So I think that was something that was always in the back of my head, but I was just following my passion. Like, I knew that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to be a chef. I wanted to cook. I loved the experiences that I had at Cornell, the food and wine pairing. But wine was always part of it. I was that kid. I wanted to do everything. I had this ambition. I was going to get a farm. I was going to raise my own cattle, make my own cheese, make my own charcuterie, grow grapes, make wine, have dinners every night, like for guests. I wanted to do everything. I think as you get older, you kind of realize that's not always so possible, but that was something I wanted to do. So what happened was I basically worked in New York City. I was kind of trying out at a bunch of different restaurants after working for one restaurant for about 3 years. And a mentor of mine at the time, it was Mike Anthony, a great chef in New York City. I had worked with a lot for fun. Like I would just take a day off and go work with him. I basically FedExed my resume to about 10 different restaurants that I wanted to work at, including Per Se, that Thomas Keller was opening up in New York City. And basically I got a call from Thomas one day, and he said, well, I'm not hiring for Per Se, but I'm hiring for the French Laundry, and if you're interested, I would give you a job.
Tough decision.
Right? So I think that was kind of the thing. It was like, wow, not only do I get to work at like what at the time was the pinnacle of my career, restaurant, one of the best in the world, but also I get to move to California. And I had spent time in Napa before and kind of saw wine country a little bit on spring break, because that's what people in the hospitality industry do for spring break. Right. We go to Napa.
Yeah, no Palm Beach. Yeah.
But I loved the idea, and I remember talking to Thomas about it and be like, and he kind of asked me, are you moving just for the French Laundry? And yeah, probably I was, but I was also really excited just to be out in California at the time. And so I moved out there. I ended up working there for about a year. I think it was one of the most challenging, incredible opportunities that I've ever done. I've never worked so hard in my life.
I'll bet.
Just nonstop, 20 hours a day, 6 days a week. I think it was an amazing opportunity. But I kind of needed a break. And I kind of realized I wasn't enjoying Napa, and I wasn't able to enjoy living in California. There was more that I wanted out of life. I wanted a little bit more balance. But I just needed a break from cooking. And so I helped out a few friends kind of open up restaurants, one in LA, and then kind of came back to Napa and I started working in the wine industry. There was one night that was kind of tough, and Thomas can be pretty tough on you, and he said to me on the line, he was like, well, if you can't be a chef, what are you going to do? And I just kept saying to myself, there's a lot of things I would do if I wasn't a chef. And I remembered back and all those things I wanted to do, and I'd be like, I'm in Napa. I had worked a little bit in winemaking in the Finger Lakes and in France as well at Louis Jadot for about a week. And I decided that I was like, well, why don't I learn how to make wine? Like I was smelling fermentation going on. It was harvest time. So that transition really started at that moment where I was like, okay. And I was driving back from an interview, actually at Gary Farrell. And I remember this distinctly, and I was like, oh my God, I'm kind of a workaholic, and I've always been scared of that, especially in the restaurant industry. And I was kind of thinking, I was like, oh, wine. It's like, well, I can kind of be a workaholic like 3 or 4 months a year, and then maybe the rest of the year I can have a little bit more normal of a job, a little bit more balance. And that was a little bit of a aha moment. But I think then there was also the connection between like the idea of working together at a very high level, creating beautiful things, creating food. I mean, it still is a food. It takes a little bit more time to create, and I kind of like that. So it was a little bit about the empowerment of, patience. I think it's an important word as a winemaker that I've learned. Instead of making a dish in 15 minutes or prepping for hours and then making a dish in 15 minutes, we make a dish over the course of a year, 3 years. you know, so it's kind of a great process and really exciting.
I know we're kind of on a short leash time-wise today, so I'm very grateful for you making the time. I've been to your tasting room many times, and for our listeners, I want to know, is that a tasting room people can walk into, or do they need an appointment? How does it work?
It's a great opportunity. We're open to the public. You know, we prefer appointments, but we always have something that we kind of keep aside for walk-ins. And there's lots of different opportunities. There's kind of the quick tasting where you could kind of come in just for a few tastes if you have 20 minutes, a half an hour. There's also an incredible experience. We have an on-site chef. We've built a commercial kitchen where really you can do food and wine pairings with some of our best Cabernets, slightly unconventional pairings. We do a vegetarian dish, usually a fish dish, and then like unconventional meat. And it's just a great opportunity to try some of our top tier wines with an incredible chef. So there's lots of awesome experiences that we provide, and we're totally open right on Main Street, Napa Valley.
Good way to do it. And for our listeners who want to learn about you online, what is your website?
So we are simply sequoiagrove.com, the original.
Cool. Well, Jesse, I really appreciate you taking the time today to hang out here in Milwaukee. How long are you here for?
So I'm just here for a few days visiting some of our partners throughout the city and throughout the area, and then I'm heading out tomorrow to check out St. Louis, actually. Cool. But thank you so much for having me. This has been a great time. I really enjoyed talking with you.